What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and I got an awesome list for you today. I'm kind of excited about this one. It's another in our line of weird decks that we've been doing for the last week or so, but whatever. This is my favorite kind of decks, and I've been having a lot of fun with it, so I hope you've been enjoying it too. I got another weird one for you today. Today's deck is trying to do a lot of things. It's sort of a combo deck, kind of a blue-white mid-range deck. It's a little bit of an embalmed deck, and there's some control elements, but it all comes together in the end. Let me show you blue-white Arcane Sphinx. That's the best name I could come up with. Well, your ears may have perked up back there when I said it's kind of a combo deck, and that's where the stupid name of the deck comes from. We're going to play 3 copies of Ixalan, Cry Sphinx Sovereign, that awesome thing, and 3 copies of Arcane Adaptation. Now, in case it, for some reason, hasn't dawned on you yet, all of our creatures are sphinxes, so that means they're sphinges, I think is the actual plural of sphinxes. What a dumb word. So, anyway, all of your creatures are sphinx at this point, once you get an Arcane down. So once you get your Ixalan out, pretty much everything you play from then on that's a creature you get a discount on, and a little mini Factor Fiction when it comes into play. That's just unfreaking believable value. One more thing, by the way, you may have also heard me say back there that this is kind of an embalm deck. Literally half of our creatures embalm, 11 of our creatures we can embalm out of the graveyard. And obviously, Ixalan won't decrease their embalm costs, but when they enter the battlefield, they're sphinxes, and so you'll be able to Factor Fiction off of embalmed creatures too, and eternalized creatures and such. So that's pretty awesome to note as well. Once you get a Ixalan down and you untap with it, it can easily be game over. You play a couple of creatures that same turn at a discount, and you get 2 Factor Fictions generating more value. And most of our creatures have enter the battlefield triggers too, so that's just even extra value. We get crazy, crazy value. That is the key word here. Once we get a Ixalan down and untap with it, we win quickly. The only problem is we have to get to this point in the game. Ixalan is a 6-drop, and then we have to untap with it. That's a bunch of turns, so the entire rest of the deck needs to be dedicated to 2 things. First of all, creatures that we can take advantage of with Ixalan play, and also getting us to that point where we can have a Ixalan play at all. So the rest of the deck is mostly creatures, and a lot of those creatures are geared defensively. So let's start with the 4 copies of Glorybound Initiate. What I like about GBI is that it's both defensive and offensive, Against certain decks, control decks where you're going to be against a naked board for the first few turns, this is a pretty good aggressive creature that can help put the game out of reach relatively fast. But against aggro decks, even if you don't exert it, 3 power for a 2-mana creature is a pretty good deal that'll trade in combat and help extend the game. And when you do exert it and swing in, that helps extend the game against aggro too. So there's just so much to like about Glorybound. If we're going to play a 2-drop creature at all, I think it should probably be GBI. But on into the 3-drops, I want to play a bunch of these. There are 10 3-drops in the deck, but there's a reason for that. Not only are they good in the sort of early to middle game, all of our 3-drops either help us find the combo or are defensive in some way, So they help extend the game a little bit in the early to mid game, but they're also just 1 mana once you get a Ixalan down, and I want to take advantage of that as much as possible. So with that in mind, let's start with the 3 copies of Champion of Wits. Well, this is a hot creature right now for a reason. It's a chump blocker that draws you 2 cards. You don't care that you filter. You have to discard 2. Who cares? You're just looking for certain combo pieces, and in some cases you'll be looking for defensive pieces you can again use to extend the game to get to Ixalan in the first place. So, just Champion does so much in a deck like this. We're gonna chump block with it, and once you actually get a Ixalan down, it's kind of ridiculous what a Champion can do for you. You play Champion for just 1 blue mana. Not only do you get its enter the battlefield trigger, but you get the Ixalan one too. You get your Factor Fiction as well. So it's just ridiculous value. And that doesn't even mention embalming it, or eternalizing it. Once you actually can do that, then that's just 4 cards. You have to discard 2 and you get a Factor Fiction. Just Champion of Wits obviously goes in the deck. It's good no matter when you play it. And that's sort of the motto, the thing to remember about all of our creatures in this deck. When we play them on curve, turn 3, turn 4, we want them to be good defensive options. But if we have a Ixalan play and we top deck them late, we also want them to be able to have good enter the battlefield triggers or generate value in some way outside of just Ixalan. Again, just in case we don't have a Ixalan out or whatever. But if we do, we still want them to be good top decks that generate more value outside of just Ixalan. So not only Champion of Wits, but the majority of our creature base fits that criteria. Case in point, Sunscourge Champion, which is also good almost always. Obviously, we needed a piece in this deck so that we didn't just punt the first game against aggro. We were having serious trouble against aggro for a while, but Sunscourge Champion helps solve that problem just a little bit. It's great on turn 3 against Ramanap Red, and it can come back relatively soon against that deck too. And if you've got a Yunesh in play, obviously this thing is only 1 mana, gains you some life, and you get some value in the form of cards too. So just another card that is good early, and once you have your Yunesh out, it's still amazing then. And real talk, the card's just kind of a necessary evil. It's just not realistic to not want to play this card. It wasn't in the deck to begin with, but again, you can't afford to just auto-concede Game 1 against Ramanap Red and other aggro decks and stuff. So the card just kind of has to be in there, but that's okay. Don't be mad about that. It's actually a really good card. We're going to finish off the 3-drops with 4 copies of Fairgrounds Warden, which is actually like my favorite 3-drop in the entire deck. This is the perfect example of a creature that's good whether you're building up to Yunesh or you already have a Yunesh out. Obviously, you play this on curve or on turn 4 or whatever, it's removal that demands a removal spell. That's pretty awesome, and we'll again talk about extending the game. That'll give you a couple of extra turns at least. But if you already have a Yunesh out, this is removal that also gets you a Factor Fiction for 1 mana. That's a really tough rate to beat. That's a blowout. Now, we're only playing 1 4-drop creature, but it's super awesome. We're going to play 2 copies of Vizier of Many Faces, another embalmable creature. We've already seen a bunch of them, and there's actually another one coming up. Anyway, Vizier is so stupid right now. A lot of people are carrying it in the sideboard because there's a lot of good creatures that you want to copy. You want to copy their Scarab God, which, trust me, is ridiculous. You want to copy their Scarab God. You can copy their Glory Bringer. Sometimes you can copy their Bristling Hydra. There's a bunch of stuff on the other side of the board that you might want to copy, but Vizier is even more dangerous in this deck where you can copy Fairgrounds Warden, Champion of Wits, there's a bunch of stuff. Sunscourge Champion and even the next creature I'm going to show you, you might really, really want to copy. So not only are there a bunch of meta calls on the other side of the table that this is good against because it can just essentially give you a Scarab God. That's pretty ridiculous, because Scarab God's crazy in this deck. If we had the money, we'd add the 3rd color and play Scarab God. But anyway, you can just get a Scarab God if they happen to have one out and you have a Vizier in your hand. So there's that. But also, all of our creatures are ridiculous to copy with Viziers. So definitely goes in the deck. And to finish off the creatures, we're going to play 3 copies of Angel of Sanctions in this deck. Holy crap. This is like Fairgrounds Warden, but better, you get a 3-power flyer that's really resilient to a lot of removal right now too, and it's removal in and of itself. And if they happen to remove it, you can just bring it back and get another Factor Fiction if you have a Yunesh out. So, and if you have a Yunesh out the first time you play it, it's only 3 mana for this effect. That's just card is crazy, and it's yet another card. I've said this about a few of our creatures, obviously. This is the motto. But it's a card that whether or not you have Yunesh, it's ridiculous, Turn 5 leading up to Yunesh, it's a crazy removal spell that can often, block and not die too. And once you play Yunesh, again, 3 mana, remove a guy, get a Factor Fiction and a 3/4 flyer. What do you want? That's just I know that the combo seems so silly, Yunesh and Arcane Adaptation of all cards, but some of these creatures, man, Angel of Sanctions, Fairgrounds Warden, really all of our creatures are just so stupid once you get this combo in place, but they're fine even if you don't have it. But we do have some slots left over for spells in this deck, so I'm going to mostly use these slots for counter magic and a little bit of removal. We're going to start with 4 copies of Essence Scatter here. A little surprisingly, but we really don't have a whole lot to protect ourselves in the early game, and Essence Scatter is surprisingly good at that, especially on the play where it counters Earthshaker Kenra, Long Tusk Cub, and a bunch of other stuff, Glint Sleeve Siphoner, Walking Ballista. There's a ton of stuff you can counter with an early Essence Scatter, but it's even fine all the way up into turn 5, 6, you can counter Bristling Hydra, you can counter Glory Bringer, there's Scarab God, and it's awesome, by the way, to spend 2 mana getting rid of a 5 mana card. That's again, value. So it's a really good rate right now because every good play in Standard, other than Godfarer's Gift and maybe Anointed Procession, is a creature. So Essence Scatter is just an amazing counter spell right now, and we need something to cover our butts in the early game. Speaking of which, I'm going to double down a little bit here on 2-mana counterspells and play 3 copies of Censor. I don't think Censor is incredible all the time. It's amazing on the play. Don't get me wrong, but even if you draw it a little bit late, you can always cycle it. No harm, no foul. Essentially, a mana for a card is always fine. In the early game, Censor is obviously incredible. So I'm just going to pack a few copies here. Again, necessary evil because we have almost no protection in the early game. And to finish things off here, we're going to play 2 copies of Cast Out. And yeah, I know, it looks a little bit like too much parody with things like Fairgrounds Warden and Angel of Sanctions, but I really like a removal spell that's really hard to remove. You know what I mean? Like, they can just shock or Magma Spray a Fairgrounds Warden, and that's kind of... that's it. That's that. You know what I mean? But Cast Out is really, really tough to remove. And against a lot of decks, it's just a removal spell, period. You know, it's Exile, which is really important against Hazoret and Scarab God, which are both cards that have decks built around them that can't really deal with Cast Out. So that's a plus, you know. But Cast Out, again, I will say this one more time. I think it's a card that we have to play even if we kind of don't want to. I want as much removal in this deck as possible because we're really trying to get to a 6-drop, so we have to control the board as much as we can. Now here are our lands right here. Pretty simple mana base. There's 26 though. That seems like a lot of lands, but again, we've got to get to a 6-drop and we got to get it on turn 6 at the earliest. You know what I mean? We got a Unesh in our hand. Every turn we have to wait to play it after turn 6 is really, really painful, and we have a pretty high chance of losing if we don't get to Unesh as soon as possible. So I want to get all of our drops. Here's our sideboard right here. Try to keep it as budget as possible. The most expensive cards are River's Rebuke and Vizier of Many Faces. I did want a 3rd Vizier in there. It's just that strong right now. And River's Rebuke is ridiculous. You know, we're trying to get to a 6-drop anyway. What's a couple of more, right? And against like tokens decks and or energy decks that tend to put like a bunch of Thopters out with Whirler Virtuoso, it's just a really, really strong piece right now. And that is popping up in sideboards a lot. And we'll do it here. It's a good piece. We're also going to play 3 Negates because we really don't want to get swept, and we hate when people go to remove Fairgrounds Warden and Angel of Sanctions, so it's good to have some protection for them too. Crook of Condemnation is mostly against Godfarrow's Gifts decks. You just have to have it somewhere on the board. Sunscourge Champion will finish off the playset against aggro. And then Forsake the Worldly, that's in there. Again, against artifacts and enchantments, obviously, but there's a lot more of them right now than you'd think. Godfarrow's Gift is the big one, but there's also other copies of Cast Out, Ixalan's Binding, Anointed Procession. There's just a lot right now that Forsake can hit, so I'm going to carry a couple of copies. Ixalan's Binding is in there over Cast Out. I just really like Binding right now against the same options I mentioned earlier, Hazoret and Scarab God. If you can get down a Binding against either of them, game shifts heavily in your favor because they can never play the best card in their deck again. And also, Timid. You may notice Timid. This is sort of a fun pick right here, but we're playing so many embalming and eternalizing creatures that Timid can actually make the difference against mid-range decks that we may stall out against, get into board stalls and such like that. When it becomes a war of attrition, Timid's actually really good with all of our embalm and eternalized dudes. And here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 62, which is surprisingly high for a deck that's only about $65 on TCG Player. That's about $1 a point. That's a good deal. And the deck is surprisingly strong. We carry, again, sort of a surprising amount of like highly efficient and relatively powerful cards in this standard, despite the fact that we're using what appears to be a really janky combo. Pretty much every other card in the deck besides the combo is a somewhat played card in standard right now. So our power stat is actually relatively higher than it should be. In a lot of cases, we're actually a really resilient deck too because of all of our embalm creatures. And if we get a Unesh down and we play even one guy, we get all of the card advantage in the world from that play. So it's actually not a terrible deck even before you get the Unesh down. But again, I want to stress this. You get that Unesh on the board and you untap, you are going to win the game like most of the time. This deck actually went through a ton of rewrites because at first it was just like, oh, I'm going to try this stupid thing out. And there were actually Sphinxes in the deck. I know I'm going to get people in the comments like, why don't you play Curator or Glyph Keeper or any of that? It's because like we could just play better cards. Like all of our creatures are already Sphinxes if we get our Arcane adaptation down regardless. So it's like we don't have to play subpar stuff like Curator. And Glyph Keeper actually performed okay, but I still say that we have better options than the actual Sphinxes that are in Standard. Why wouldn't we just play better cards? So this deck actually became a little bit better than I originally thought it could ever be because we're actually playing a bunch of really strong pieces. And remember, if you did want to see this deck like all in one place and get it if you want to do that, you can just click the very first link in the description box. That'll take you over to TCG Player. They help me bring you content. They're pretty good dudes for that. So click on the link. Helps the channel out. Even if you just click, you don't have to look at the deck. Just click on the link and it helps me out. So do that if you want to. You can also do other stuff though. Like the video if you enjoyed the content. I sincerely hope you did. A lot of work went into this one. Like way more work than I thought I was going to put into the deck when I first started it. But it turns out I figured there was actually something there there. So I'm putting a lot of work into this one. So like it if you liked it. Sub if you're new, or if you haven't subbed yet. What are you doing? Go ahead and do that. Hit the bell for the notifications. Follow me on Twitter. You should also do that. SBMTG Dev if you're interested. You can go to Patreon, kick me a buck, and know what decks are coming up the day before I upload them. If you go to patreon.com/SBMTG, you should do that too. But I'm tapped out for now. I'm pretty sure that's all I got for this one. So let me know how you felt about it down there in the comments section. I sincerely hope you try this one out. Even if you have to like proxy it up. There is something there. Like even if this isn't the final build, there's something there. Even though it's a janky combo deck, I promise you, there's something going on. So give this one a shot. I hope you do. And I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards.